Hello, everyone. I'm Rob. I hope everyone's doing well. Today, I'll be discussing my curriculum map. Obviously, we were tasked with identifying physical, emotional, social, and cognitive development characteristics, as well as interests for each age group. We also identified possible projects, how they could relate to Bethlehem, and how they employed post-studio practices, their associated accommodations for ELLs and differently abled students, as well as associated objectives and state standard connections. Regardless of the age range, the connections to the community, as well as the opportunities for collaboration, personal interpretation, simplicity, and relevance are really guiding me throughout the process. The first age group was pre-K to kindergarten. Basic motor movements, desire to meet new friends, learning basic rules of society, drawing basic shapes, and building basic structures and varied representations for reality within drawings were some of the most distinct developmental milestone characteristics. Interests included superheroes and princesses, Play Doh, sand, shaving cream, Legos, animals, dressing up, sports and games, and many others. For this age group, I decided to highlight autism. Children who fall on the spectrum often struggle forming relationships and communicating with others. Our teachers have the unique opportunity to stimulate the senses in a few ways that other subjects can't. Using time at the beginning or end of class to calm students can benefit not only children with autism, but everyone in the class. Similarly, using a wide variety of materials and encouraging students to explore their characteristics and properties can diversify children's understanding of those materials. It's important to use specific words, explaining the importance of the materials, modeling instructions while verbally saying them, and reviewing instructions with children who may be struggling. All of these things can be beneficial. Safety and exploration of interests were all two important community influences that I identified. Children learn about safety but also want to explore the world around them. I identified a few projects for this age range. One involves students collecting 3 to 4 boxes of any size, shape, and color from home. In class, the students can decorate the boxes in any manner that they wish with any materials that they wish. The resulting boxes would probably exemplify students' favorite colors and art materials, but more importantly, their interests and even self characteristics. The differently shaped and sized boxes of different colors and designs would offer countless opportunities for collaborative building while simultaneously introducing students to others' interests. This project repurposes objects that traditionally hold very little value to people. Decorating allows children to express their creative freedom. Using the boxes to erect their own creations gives the box an afterlife, once again challenging children's creativity, encouraging collaboration. In an even greater sense, the project shows children a seemingly useless material can hold value. A second project is one where they could bring in their favorite stuffed animal and trace them on paper and cut them with assistance, or trace animals on the specific area on a sidewalk or in a parking lot. Students could then decorate the trace they made. The final product would be essentially a zoo, with every child contributing with their favorite animal. Both projects are student driven and involve few instructions. This project incorporates something of value for students, which is their favorite stuffed animal, and turns it into a shared group experience. Since children use their own stuffed animals and decorate them, they can still exercise their individual creativity. They can also work together to draw environments around their animals. When all of the tracings are combined, children see their own contribution next to that of other students who hold their stuffed animals and subsequent work in a similar regard. I think that ELLs, children with special needs, and other students would participate and enjoy both projects equally without feeling at a disadvantage. The concept for each of the projects is relatively straightforward and offers various opportunities for creativity on the student's part. The next age range was grades 1 through 5. Rapidly improving gross and fine motor skills, varied physical build, concern over peer acceptance, friendships, asking questions, seeking answers, differentiating facts from opinion, more realistic use of colors and shapes in drawings, and definitive size and placement of objects in drawings were some of the most distinct developmental milestone characteristics. Interests included superheroes and villains, good versus evil, video games, adventures, virtual worlds, social media, animals, plants, nature, natural processes, friends, sports, and activities. Friendships development was the major community influence identified for this age. I suggested that they find value in finding similarities between themselves and other students and become slightly less dependent on their families as a result. Some children have difficulty developing friendships. In severe cases, children can get excluded or even bullied. Our teachers can be proactive against bullying by implementing collaborative, introspective projects. I focused on attention deficit disorders, which are commonly diagnosed in children. Common characteristics include difficulty paying attention, talkative nature, difficulty following directions, being forgetful, difficulty writing, and children may experience difficulty maintaining focus when completing long-term assignments. When providing written instructions, teachers should use precise words and short sentences. Teachers should also model instructions as they're being read, which reinforce the written word. When children are completing projects, they should receive guided reinforcement throughout the duration of class. One project that I suggested was a superhero self portrait. A teacher can conduct an in class brainstorm of what students view are issues in the Bethlehem community. From this data, children can choose one of the problems and develop an idea for a superhero with a power who would combat the issue. As a bonus, students can draw one defining feature or landmark of Bethlehem in the background. This project challenges students to identify contemporary social issues and empowers them not only to be aware, but to contribute their own solution. It offers them a way to be a part of the solution as well. A second project is more collaborative in nature. Students work together to create a simple outline background of the community, Bethlehem, including outlines of important landmarks, buildings, etc. Students then create an individual silhouette of themselves, which would either be like just their head or like their upper body or even their entire body. And they fill in the silhouette with words, pictures, or drawings that represent how they contribute to the community. So, for example, if they are scouts or athletes, they can draw themselves in a uniform. The silhouettes would then be pasted and layered onto the background and displayed somewhere within the school. This project is collaborative, demands questioning and thinking on the part of the student, and emphasizes process over product. The work goes into the idea. Students are tasked with developing a background based on their view of Bethlehem. So the background would basically represent what they see as important in their own community. They're also tasked with identifying how they contribute to their own community. In relation to students who have ADHD or are learning English, the focus falls more so on the teacher than the actual project. A teacher should be willing to work with the student one-on-one. Keeping the students on task is paramount. Giving them suggestions may also be beneficial because it provides them with a starting point. The third age range is grade 6 to 8. Progressing physical development through puberty, maintenance of healthy relationships, romantic interest, evaluation of values, new emotions, new views on society, academics as an individual experience, more depth of instruction, importance of artistic techniques and meaning, and art as a hobby were some of the most distinct developmental milestone characteristics. Interests included independence, friends, sexual attraction, sports, social media, movies and TV shows, clothing, video games, apps, and music. I identified individuality as a major age-related concern for Bethlehem middle schoolers. I suggested that children feel more independent, yet they are still dependent on their parents. Many identify their friend groups and associate strongly with them. Social media is also a factor as more children create accounts and follow their peers. Social media, however, can pose a threat. Many students are not yet mature enough to know what is appropriate and inappropriate to post on social media. New and confusing feelings, including stress, anxiety, and attraction, can be catalysts for mistakes on social media. Children also become more aware of their socioeconomic status, which is highly varied throughout Bethlehem. This can naturally cause divides and falsely develop stereotypes between groups. These factors considered, it's important to foster individuality and bolster self-image through art. For this age range, I highlighted hearing and impaired students. Because they are navigating so much auditory input, it may be beneficial to utilize strategic seating. Seating students at the front of the room provides them with a better opportunity to hear instructions. Restating directions to the teacher is another helpful role. A teacher should also be mindful not to draw attention to the hearing impaired students. So again, if a teacher chooses to repeat instructions, she shouldn't be, or he or she shouldn't be looking directly at a student. If a student has a dominant hearing side, a teacher should try to speak on that side. Finally, if they have assistive technology, a teacher should learn how to use these devices correctly. One project idea I had was centered around a short narrative or poem based on a historical or temporary event. So basically, a teacher would present students with a poem that has very distinct wording, also very descriptive wording. After reading or listening, the students would write down a word or words in colors that they associate with what they read or heard. So, for example, a teacher could present students with a poem on the atomic bombings, slavery, even more contemporary events like the Black Lives Matter movement or the coronavirus. and basically children kind of react to that. Children would then paint their emotions and feelings and stamp or write the word that was written um, that evoked a feeling for them. And they would do this with watercolors, even markers. I think it would challenge them to visually express their emotional connections to something that they've read. It encourages students to communicate social, political, or personal responses in the art. Creating the art allows them to convey their knowledge to others in a way that is personally meaningful. If other students view the project, it may encourage a dialogue for those within the learning community. Another idea is to use an 8 by 12 piece of paper with a simple curved black line. The paper is photocopied and distributed to each student. They are then instructed to construct an image based on the line, orienting the page, landscape, or portrait. Students use other materials like crayons and markers to enhance the line in their own creation. This project provides a means to express emotional and imaginative states of the mind. The concept of their art is completely dependent upon their own perspective. One student may turn the line into a roller coaster, another may turn it into a horizon. It encourages creativity and celebrates each student's unique perspective. I think the really interesting thing would be to compare every student's creation next to each other to see just the variation in what they created. I think that would really be a nice way to get into like a discussion about maybe diversity of thought, and maybe you can move into like acceptance of diversity from there. Since these projects are heavily based on a student's own interpretation, modifications for ELLs and hearing impaired students is relatively straightforward. A teacher should be prepared to spend extra time with these students in class and provide resources beforehand for these students, with which they can evaluate on their own or with the assistance of a peer, teacher, or even parent. So the final age range I'm going to cover is grades 9 through 12. Further physical development, full maturation of fine and gross motor skills, growing closer to or farther from their parents and guardians, confiding in friends, evaluating their standards compared to those of others, finding their purpose, finding solutions to conflicts, understanding the importance of academics, art as an experience motivated by meaning, precision of art, and art converting feelings and attitudes were some of the most distinct developmental milestone characteristics. Interests include independence, friends, attraction, sports, social media, movies, TV shows, college or their future, clothing, video games, apps, music, and social issues. I identified the unknown nature of the future as a major age-related concern for Bethlehem high schoolers. Adolescents struggle with fitting in and value acceptance more than before. Their views have major implications on the rest of their lives. Some decide to attend college while others pursue other careers. Regardless, high school is a mediator between childhood and adulthood. Teachers who recognize high school as a nurturing and preparatory stage implement life skills and stories into their teaching, acting as a positive influence. Being fully exposed to the outside world, they recognize society's injustices, disparities, and dangers. Many students shape their views on the outside world based on what they are exposed to within their immediate surroundings. I suggested that our teachers implement projects that allow students to reflect upon their past experiences and how those have influenced their present self. I also think projects that point to the future can be beneficial because they encourage a student to remove themselves from their current situation and set larger long-term goals and aspirations. High school can be a period in which students first encounter anxiety. The art classroom can be a respite from the stresses a student with anxiety may experience. Basic therapeutic techniques can be very effective. Creating a calming environment with the use of music, dimmers, and aromas can be effective. A teacher should set up alternative seating arrangements to put students more at ease. Open posture, neutral wording, patience, eye contact, and modeling healthy living and healthy coping mechanisms can also help students. A teacher could also offer art instruction via a choice board, which would empower the student to choose how they want to learn a concept. A project idea I had was a photograph collage to convey personally meaningful influences. Each student is tasked with taking a picture of themselves in a setting that has influenced them in some way. For example, a student who saw memorable concerts at Steel Sax might take a selfie there, or a student had memories on Main Street can take a picture there. The pictures are assembled into a collage which conveys each student's story. This project challenges students to be reflective about the experiences that have influenced their lives. It creates a connection between the past and the present, and in doing so, may provide a direction for their future. For example, maybe a student was influenced by visiting Lehigh Valley Zoo as a child. This could lead them to discover that they want to study zoology or simply work with animals. If the entire collage were to be displayed, these images could act as a way for students to become better acquainted with their classmates. Another possible project is a vision board. It conveys a student's desired future. This includes things a student wants to learn, places the student wants to go, things the student wants to do, and things the student wants to achieve. It can also be done tangibly, um, either on a poster board or digitally by use of a graphic design package. The second project is similar in that it could be an introspective exercise for a student to ponder and articulate their future. By identifying what they want to learn, see, experience, and achieve in the future, they explore their possibilities. A student who has goals for the future can make necessary steps in the present. This project is meaningful not only in the art classroom but also outside of it. Similar to the projects proposed in grades 6 to 8, these projects are heavily individual based. Many, if not most, students use their phone or cameras on a daily basis, and in this sense, the photograph project is friendly for all students. A second project may require alternate forms of explanation for ELLs. Regardless, all students have dreams and goals that they can share. So, for English language learning students, my suggested accommodations varied a lot. Put simply, for pre K to kindergarten students, I suggested understanding what is culturally appropriate and trying to implement it in class. I also thought teachers should limit use of verbal instruction and instead exemplify instructions as much as possible through actions. For grades 1 to 5, I suggested providing students with a simplified version of the instructions a week beforehand, which a support teacher could use to explain the project, or higher level English language learners could use to practice their art based English vocabulary. Teachers should also avoid creating projects that may insult a child's culture or provoke unwanted reactions from a child. More specifically, teachers should avoid asking polarizing questions or putting a student in difficult situations within class. For grades 6 to 8, I suggested providing instructional accommodations such as read recordings or directions that they can listen to multiple times, extended work periods for projects, adjusted due dates, or simply being available to help students one on one if desirable. It's also important to recognize students' independence and individuality at this stage. For grades 9 to 12, I suggested employing instructional accommodations similar to those given to students in grades 6 to 8, as well as attempting personal communication and showing that you value a student's presence. I made a number of changes throughout my curriculum maps. Many of the changes came about directly as a result of the suggestions of Dr. Baxter. Others actually stemmed from those suggestions that she made. One adjustment I made came in the form of adding examples. Initially, a number of my projects were straightforward but lacked depth. Adding specifics about the projects as well as different possible outcomes brought the projects full circle. I mentioned a project for grades 6 to 8 in which students were tasked with reading or listening to a poem and afterwards expressing their emotions through watercolors and stamping a word that the poem evoked. After feedback from Dr. Baxter, I realized that my explanation didn't necessarily do the project justice, so I suggested City in Flames, which is a specific poem, and as well as The Slave's Lament, which is another poem, as possible examples of poems. I justified use of these poems by explaining that the word choice was extremely poignant, precise, and descriptive in nature. Another adjustment I made was better connecting projects to ELLs and differently abled students. I brainstormed projects with these students in mind, but didn't necessarily thoroughly explain how and why they were appropriate for these students. I made a number of accommodation suggestions, but I never really touched upon the accommodations for projects. Dr. Baxter initially made this observation when she noticed a gap between my autism and ELL considerations and projects for grades 1 to 5. I try to clarify the considerations related to the project throughout the rest of my curriculum maps and in this video. Finally, I made a number of minor spelling mistakes. Many were simply the result of not editing thoroughly enough. This was something I didn't really consider as major until I thought about the implications it could have on my professional career. As a nurse, correct spelling, copying, and writing down words is vital to not only my credibility but also a patient's well-being. So again, that's another major takeaway I had. So a final question I'd like to pose to everyone is, what's a major takeaway from this class? Personally, I think that it really challenged my creative thinking, which was something that I never really had to utilize throughout college, and I think that I'll be able to implement in other classes. But with that being said, I'd like to thank Dr. Baxter for the past few weeks. I'd also like to thank everyone who was involved in this class. It was really great interacting with you. I hope everyone has a great rest of the summer and stay safe. Thanks.